Good morning. It's Monarch Monday, and for today's Monarch Monday, we are doing a live with Kristen from Kristen.growing, and we're going to be speaking about just how amazing the Monarch butterfly is. I think a lot of people appreciate the Monarch for a pollinator, for a beautiful butterfly. We're concerned because it's been put on some endangered species lists, but I think there's a large percentage of people that don't know just how truly uniquely amazing this insect and butterfly is. And so Kristen, who is a horticulturalist and a home gardener in Charleston, South Carolina, is going to come on and speak to us about just how amazing the Monarch is and why we should have such an appreciation for it and do everything that we can to help this amazing insect and pollinator in our own yards. With that, I'm going to add Kristen, and what you want Kristen to ask, we'll try and get to those at the end. If you put them in the question bubble at the bottom, that'll be the best way to make sure that we see them and nothing gets missed. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hello. I know May is busy. I feel you. I've got school kids also. So we are so appreciative of you coming on and spending some time with us today. We are going to keep it to 30 minutes just so that people, when they consume it later, it's easier to digest. And I'll let you get back to the crying and the dealing with all the things.
Yeah, I have one graduating, so every few minutes I'm like,
I can only imagine. So I did give a brief introduction, just that you are a horticulturist and a home gardener in Charleston, South Carolina. I do believe you have already seen your first Monarch of the season.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
A couple of weeks ago. It was pretty early. It was a couple of weeks ago. It was pretty exciting.
And do you just happen to have milkweed that it comes back every year in your yard? Is that what you saw it?
I do. I have some milkweed that, I have perennial milkweed and it had already popped back up. And so I saw the Monarch flitting around the garden. And so I walked over, to the milkweed to see if it was going to find it. And sure enough, I was able to video it laying her laying her egg on the milkweed. So now I'm like, I keep watching it like I laid the egg myself,
I have experienced that level of obsession also. So that's another thing that makes the Monarch so unique is that they are able to hone in and find the milkweed wherever it is.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
But what we're going to talk about today is something that I think you mentioned that you feel passionate about, is that educating people on just why the Monarch is so unique when it comes to an insect, a butterfly, a pollinator. And so I'm going to let you start wherever you want to start with that topic.
Okay, perfect. So where I got interested in this is before I was staying home with kids, I was the horticulturist for the South Carolina Aquarium. And in that role, I found myself being the advocate inside of that organization for habitats. Lots of advocates for animals. And I really wanted to integrate that message of you cannot separate the animal, any type of critter, from its habitat. And so I became the advocate for habitats. And one of the most amazing stories that we have here in North America is the Monarch butterfly. And so I think a lot of people know that the Monarch butterfly makes this monster migration, but what I don't think that people know is that this migration is unmatched in the insect world, that it is something that's a lot more similar to a bird migration. However, birds, when they migrate, a single species goes all the way down, goes all the way up. Right? And so they have kind of this mental map of this place they're supposed to follow or this place that they're supposed to find. Monarchs don't have that. They don't have that. Okay. So let's start in the spring where we are now. Okay. Monarchs are down south and the very first eggs are being laid in places like my southern garden, and this egg is going to hatch and it is going to live as a butterfly for 2 to 6 weeks. These butterflies are going to fly as far north as they can get. They're going to find more milkweed. They're going to lay another egg. Okay. So to get all the way up north to Minnesota and Canada by the end of the summer, it's going to take 4 to 5 generations. So 4 to 5 passing of the batons until they get up there. Now it's the end of the summer and these butterflies are in Canada, you know, the fading light, the cooler temperatures, something inside Mama Monarch hormones signal her to lay a very special egg. And this special egg is laid and it hatches. And this monarch becomes what is a part of something called the super generation. Okay. The super generation is incredible because what took 4 or 5 generations to get north, this butterfly is larger and it can live longer and it flies all the way back down to Mexico in 1 generation. The reason that this is nuts is the super generation lives like 8 times longer than the other butterflies. So it would be like me living to my regular old age of 88 or whatever the average lifespan for, you know, a female is, and my daughter living to 400. You know what I mean? Same species, completely different lifespan. So then the super generation, they track all the way down back to Mexico, to a place they've never seen, to a place that their mother had never seen, their grandmother had never seen, their great-grandmother had never seen. This is encoded inside of their genetics. So it's just passed down through their DNA. It's, you know, multiple generations back, they've never seen it. So how do they get there? They have wild navigation. Like they have the most insane navigation system. And I think that's what makes me so excited about monarchs, is just like how cool they are. So first of all, their eyes can see polarized light. And that's not unusual in the insect world. Bees can do this too. And that way they can always track the sun, even on cloudy days, right? Even on super overcast days, monarchs still know where the sun is. They have a brain the size of a sesame seed, right? They're getting ready to travel 3,000 miles. And I think that it's important to recognize that pretty much all organisms have some sort of an internal clock. Like we have our circadian rhythms, right? Where we know it's day, we know it's night. Well, monarchs, they have a clock inside of them that can tell them what part of the year they're born into. It's called a circannual clock. So if you're a species that is not going to see the entire year, you need to know what slice of the year you're born into, right? So they have that clock inside of them. They know what time of year they're born, which is really cool. They also have this solar compass inside of their head, right? And not only is it a solar compass, it's a solar compass that can tell time. So they're following the sun. So they, like I said, they don't have a map to get down to Mexico, but what they have is a heading. They know roughly which direction they're supposed to be heading. That's what's been passed down through DNA. And they follow the sun, but the sun moves across the horizon throughout the day, and they can see it with their eyes, right? And their antenna are telling them what time of year it is, like what month it is. They can see the sun, but the sun is moving. So they have to know what time of day it is, whether it's 10 o'clock in the morning or 6 p.m., to know where the sun should be so that they can continue tracking correctly. It's bonkers. I mean, it's bonkers. So you're like, that sounds pretty familiar. Like that is how humans navigated the ocean, right? Is knowing what time of year, where the sun was supposed to be, what time of day, and that's how we navigated across oceans. And monarch butterflies are doing this with a brain the size of a sesame seed. It's crazy. It's crazy. And it's the only butterfly that does this, you know? I mean, it's wild. Now, the cool thing about butterflies is that they do all of this. Now, if you are a Western butterfly, west of the Rocky Mountains, then you're going to travel down through California. There's a population that overwinters down in Southern California. These are Western monarchs. And if you followed monarch news, you may have heard that this last year was very good for Western monarchs because their numbers have, we're not going to say bounced back. we're not going to say that. Their numbers are increasing for the first time. And that is because, you know, people are talking about the importance of planting milkweed along their habitat. So there's a population that overwinters there. And there's also giant population that overwinters in central Mexico. So if you're east of the Rocky Mountains, right, these butterflies pretty much funnel straight down through the center of the United States, down through Texas, and they think that they're going to central Mexico. They know of a few places where the monarchs overwinter. We don't know all of them, you know, and they're very hard to get to. They're at 10,000 feet, and you can only get there by like hiking and horseback riding, right? They're very hard to get to. Now, if you're like us and you live on the East Coast of the United States, these butterflies are pretty cool too. So they followed the East Coast, right? They follow it down. They go down through the Carolinas, through Georgia, and now they're going to jump over the ocean, over to Cuba, and into the Yucatan Peninsula. So they're crossing the Gulf of Mexico, which is wild. These are insects. They can fly, you know, like 10 miles an hour. Oh, that's the other thing. They're flying like 10 miles an hour for 8 hours a day, you know, for weeks and weeks and weeks. I mean, for 3,000 miles. It's insane.
Crossing the Gulf of Mexico, that's insane to me. I mean, there's nowhere for them to stop and take a break, right? I mean, that's...
Well, I mean, surely there are like little islands, you know what I mean? And these, so when I was at the South Carolina Aquarium, I was working with the Park Service. They'd wanted to create Fort Sumter. For those of you who don't know, I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and Fort Sumter is an island just in the harbor of Charleston. And they wanted to create a butterfly kind of a way station there, because any island out there in the water is so critically important to butterflies, because they need it. They need to fuel their bodies and rest so that they can continue flying. Because if it's hard to fly over land, it's even harder to fly over water.
Exactly.
It's really windy out there.
I didn't mean to get you off track. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Yeah, so but like I said, they don't know every place that these butterflies are overwintering. They know that they're overwintering in the high mountains in Mexico. Yeah, like,
and I've been doing some research, and it sounds like it's a very specific, like Oyamel fir forest. It's a very specific height. They pick a spot that is like protected by wind and rain, and it's near streams, so that they're highly sensitive to temperature. So once it does warm up a little bit, they're able to go to a stream, grab a drink of water, get back quickly,
right,
before it gets too cold. So like the fact that they have found this like exact perfect place that meets all of their criteria is amazing. And then also scary in that with climate change and with logging, like this area has been at risk. And I think luckily the Mexican authorities have been working to teach the people that, you can make more money with the tourism and the monarchs than you can with the logging, to try and protect this area, because it is a little, if that area is gone, like what will happen to the monarchs?
So I think that is like a really important segue into like the next topic of conservation. And it's not just what if that area is gone, but what if there's you live in Charlotte. What if there's no milkweed in Charlotte? Yeah. The issue about the conservation and the bringing back of the monarch butterflies is not protecting the forests in Mexico. It's protecting an entire continent of habitat. We need the entire continent. We need milkweed from Canada, down through Ohio and Colorado and Texas, like down into Mexico. We need all of it. And I know that the U.S. Forest Service works with the Mexican government. I mean, they know how important it is. So I know that they're attempting to to work together to, you know, conserve all of this. But we don't just need the forests in Mexico. We need all of it, you know. We need the milkweed in my Charleston yard, you know.
Would you say planting milkweed is one of the #1 things a home gardener can do to help the monarch?
I would be more specific than that. I would say that planting milkweed that is native to your specific place is very important. One of the ways that monarch butterflies know that it is time to move on is milkweed is no longer there. And so when your native milkweed dies back, then they know that it's time to move on, whether that is north or south, whichever direction they're going, it's time for them to move on. So planting native milkweed is incredibly important. If you have tropical milkweed, you need to, it's going to be in Charleston, South Carolina, the tropical milkweed is in its full glory in October. It looks incredible. Cut it back. It's time for it to go. Native milkweed is dying back. Tropical milkweed also needs to go. It hurts their heart. It hurts everybody's heart to cut back this beautiful plant, but you are doing more harm to monarchs by keeping your tropical milkweed thriving past when native milkweed should be gone.
That's excellent information. Do you have a favorite resource for people to find out what milkweed is native to their area? Like, should they check their extension office? What do you recommend?
So most states have a native plant society. And I think that that is a fantastic place to start. This is a very hot topic for native plant gardeners. And so for the South Carolina Native Plant Society, they published an entire booklet on all of the native milkweeds that were available to grow in South Carolina. And I feel like North Carolina probably has the same thing. So extension, yes. You could specifically Google your state's Native Plant Society and get in contact with them. Surely they probably have some literature because this is a hot topic right now.
Yes, absolutely. And what can be a little demoralizing is I went around Charlotte to nurseries to find what milkweed they were carrying, and everyone was carrying either tropical or hairy balls milkweed, neither of which are native to my area. And then even if you buy, you shouldn't buy them, but if you do, you're also at risk of them being sprayed with neonicotinoids, a pesticide that's damaging to the butterfly. I personally this year have grown all of my own milkweed from seed with native varieties, but I'm understanding why growers tend to sell the tropical is because I think it grows a lot easier than planting native. So people need to realize that maybe you have to start earlier or have lower expectations on germination, and to find resources where if you're buying plants that they're not sprayed with anything that's going to hurt the monarch.
So I think that brings up another point, is that when it comes to native plants, it's hard we want instant gratification, right? We want our yard to look like boom, right? But when it comes to native plants, the long haul, the patience that's really what you need to have, because the very best thing that you can do for pollinators, that you can do for monarch butterflies and all pollinators, is to plant things from seed. And here's why you should plant things from seed: genetic diversity. Most of these other plants that are grown are clones, right? And so I talked about that last week, about all the different things that are cloned. Well, ornamental plants, including milkweed, they are also cloned. So it is no genetic diversity. It is 2 million of the exact same genetics sitting out there in the landscape. However, when you plant an individual seed, its genetics are going to be entirely different from the next seed, in the same way that I have 5 children and all of their genetics are different, right? So planting native seeds is the very best thing that you can do. And it's going to take a while. Sometimes seeds don't germinate. Sometimes you have to do a little bit more research by, cold stratification, putting them in the refrigerator in some, damp soil. those are, you know, to up their chances to germinate. But yeah, seed is the very best thing you can do because of genetic diversity.
Yeah.
The more diverse an ecosystem is, the more resilient it is to all stresses.
Yeah, you made a great point. Like planting natives is you're playing the long game, but it's going to benefit you in the end, not just the ecosystem, but you as a gardener, because native plants, they are adapted to your growing conditions, your climate, your soil. Like they're going to do better. They're not going to need to be babied. So it's going to take more effort on the front end. And managing expectations. But then as a gardener, you can like sit back and be like, okay, these are easier on the tail end, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not just on the like tail end 10 years, for, you know what I mean? But like instantly they're easier. They're more adapted to pests. They're more, they're more adapted to your climate, the water usage, you know?
Okay.
Seeds are the way to go. And that's hard for people because it takes a long time.
Yeah. So I wanted to look at the questions and see if we had time to hit on some of those. Is there any, but before I do that, I want to make sure that you have been able to like get across all the key points that you wanted to touch on today.
Yeah, I think so. I just think that I really want people to like know that it's more than just like they make a long flight, you know, like they're the only ones. Like this is it. These are the only insects that do that. And it makes them unique, special, worth saving, because we certainly do not know everything about them. There's so much more to learn, and we are not going to learn unless they are here for the long haul.
Right. And there's lots of programs people can get involved in, like citizen scientists, and you can go to places like Monarch Watch, Journey North, and you can find out more information on how you can be involved. But let me ask you real quickly, do you have any favorite resources for people that want to learn more, whether it's books or websites, podcasts?
Okay, I wrote some down. Monarch Joint Venture, which is an outreach of the University of Minnesota. That is a great spot for information. Xerces Society, that's Xerces, Xerces Society is a fantastic place to learn about monarchs. The U.S. Forest Service actually has a ton of information. Also, if you're looking for like easily digestible as a layman kind of information, a great place is to look for teacher resources, right? So these teacher resources, they're written basically to teach a middle schooler, you know, or high schooler. So it's written very much in layman's terms. And so those types of YouTube videos that are specifically for like high school or middle school students are incredibly informative. So that's what I do a lot. And then also, one thing that I want to shout out is there is a movement happening called Homegrown National Park, which is, I don't know if you know Dr. Doug Ptolemy. Doug Ptolemy, he's written a lot of books, but he is an entomologist. And so beyond just monarchs, this is making your yard friendly to insects, because the more insects we have, the more resilient our ecosystems are in general, because diversity equals resilience.
Now, was that what you mentioned? Is that the name of his book?
So Homegrown National Park is actually the name of an Instagram account that he has and website, and you can certify your yard. You can like put your yard on the map for being a homegrown national park. And his whole thing is, we don't have enough land in the United States of America to preserve pockets of land. We don't have enough land to do that. So we need to change our focus, and we need to take the land that we do have as homeowners, and we need to transfer that over to be more of a national park type of a thing, where you're planting natives. So that my native plants, you know, are a stopover for my neighbor 2 streets back. They also have native plants, and they can make it all the way up to Charlotte, and they have plenty of places. Pollinators have plenty of places they can stop along the way. But his idea is to incorporate the plants that pollinators need, butterflies, all pollinators need, within land that we already have, instead of trying to slice off land and protect it.
And I'm assuming going along with not only planting natives and the plants that these insects need is also watching what you spray, right? Okay. We won't touch on that. I don't know that we have time for that, but like just, if you're going to go to all this trouble,
you're going
to create
all the trouble to plant a whole lot of things for insects, then you don't want to kill them off by spray.
And so many are not selective. So you think you're just targeting one thing and you're really killing a lot of beneficials in the process,
correct,
right?
And there are lots of organic approved non-selective insecticides. So yeah.
Okay.
That's enough.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right. Let me check the questions. So someone asked, does tropical milkweed even die later than in, say, north than native? So I guess they're asking, like, if you plant tropical in like Minnesota, won't it die?
Right. So if you plant a tropical milkweed in, say, Minnesota, obviously tropical milkweed is not going to overwinter in Minnesota, and it's going to die back. And so that's not going to be so much of an issue. It's going to be significantly more of an issue in places where I live, in the Southeast, in Florida, in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Texas. These tropical plants will overwinter. They'll never die. They'll live all the way through the winter, and they will be a breeding ground for OE, which is, microorganism that infects monarch butterflies, and they don't live as long. They can't breed. It's a bad thing. So you need your milkweed to die back.
Okay, we did get one question about beetles eating milkweed. Is there anything we can or should do? I'm not sure they didn't goes into specifics, but should we ever worry about something other than the monarchs, caterpillars consuming the milkweed and trying to protect it?
Okay, so I don't know about any beetles that eat milkweed. I don't know about that. There is something called a milkweed bug, and no, I would do nothing. I would let the insects eat the milkweed. The milkweed is there not just for monarchs, but it's also for that milkweed bug, right? So we're not trying to protect. I guess we're not trying to like sliver out one thing that we're trying to protect and get rid of everything else. The idea is diversity breeds resilience, right? So if you plant a plant, and if the native insects are using that plant, thumbs up. Like, that's a good thing.
That's awesome. Do you have a recommendation for how much milkweed someone should plant? Like, how much milkweed do you have in your own yard? Do you know how many plants you have?
Not enough.
Okay.
I have not enough. And my goal every year is to add a little bit more because I have low germination with milkweed. And so I would say, like as much as you really can, as much as you can stand to have, I would say more than one plant, less than 1 million, maybe 1 million's a little excessive.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. In some of my reading, I read that a monarch female can lay up to 400 eggs, but she will only lay 1 egg per milkweed leaf because
how many? I don't know that, and that's probably right. I have only ever seen 1 per milkweed leaf, and the reason that she does that is if you've ever watched monarch caterpillars, they are voracious, right? So you don't want to lay all 400 eggs on one plant because that's not enough food for them, right?
Right.
So she's trying to protect their food source. So if she lays 1 egg, then she's like, there you go. There's your snacks until you're ready to crawl out,
And I think it's important to have a lot of plants also because I was reading a book on monarchs, and in that book, they posit that the female will test the milkweed with her chemical sensitive legs to decide, like, is this a good plant for me to put my offspring on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think, is that you just have as many as you can have. And there's more likely than not, there's lots of different types of milkweed that are native to everybody's area. And so my favorite is swamp milkweed. I love it. I just love the way that it looks. And it grows really well in my area because we get tons of rain. I have lots of like kind of boggy spots in my yard. But that's not the only type of milkweed that I should grow. There's other native milkweeds, and I should incorporate variety, diversity, as many different types of plants, and I should put them in as many different places as I can. The idea would not be to cluster them all together in one, because like you're saying, like Mama Monarch, she's probably only going to lay one there, and then she's going to fly around looking for a spot for her other young. So I would say as many and as many different places as you can find a spot in your yard.
Awesome. Okay, we have hit the 30-minute mark. We did such a good job. You did such a good job. Before we go, do you have any final thoughts, parting shots, anything that you want to say?
Buy seeds. My favorite seed sources are Prairie Moon Nursery, Prairie Nursery, American Meadows, you know, any place that's going to sell native seeds. And while you're there, look at the other native seeds that they sell while you're there. Like, seeds are really fun to start. Native seeds are pretty cheap. And because they're native, you don't necessarily need to start them under lights. You can just kind of throw them around.
Right. And then in addition to milkweed, the monarchs, as they're coming back, they need some of those fall blooming nectar flowers to fuel their journey. So maybe grab some fall blooming asters. Yeah.
Things in the family are very, very important for monarchs as they're traveling back down south. These monarchs that are traveling back down south are not going to be breeding. They're not laying eggs. They don't breed. But they need loads of energy. So when you're heading back down south, think about the native plants that are blooming in the fall in general. Those are, and we have loads of native plants in the aster family, and monarch butterflies absolutely love them.
Perfect. Okay. On that note, I am going to type up a caption with all the resources that you mentioned, and then I will post this live for anyone to view at a later date. Kristen, thank you so much. You're always so amazing to talk to.
Yeah, thank you. This was really fun. I'm glad that we did this. And thank you guys, all the monarch messengers, for spreading the word about this insect. It's absolutely amazing. I want everybody to like be as excited as we are about how amazing it is.
Yeah, I don't understand how anyone could not. Like, I have had goosebumps several times while we're talking, because these creatures are just so cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
On that note, we'll see you soon. Bye.